So let's talk about one of the biggest political challenges in all of history. How do you rule ancient Rome? Now remember, the Romans famously got rid of their kings to build a republic, a whole society founded on the idea that no one person should ever have total control. So what happens when one man ends up with exactly that kind of power?
Right, that's the million-dollar question for Rome's first emperors. How do you concentrate all that power into your own hands when the people you rule absolutely hate the idea of a king? It's a paradox, and it's one that would shape the entire first century of the Roman Empire. So let's dig into how they pulled it off, or in some cases how they failed spectacularly.
All right, here's our game plan. We're going to start with Augustus, the guy who wrote the playbook on how to be a king in all but name. Then we'll see how the whole thing starts to unravel with Tiberius and Gaius, before Claudius and Nero just throw out the playbook and go for raw force. And finally, we'll look at what all this absolute power really costs them.
Okay, first up, the original mastermind of imperial rule, Augustus. This guy inherited a complete mess, a republic torn apart by civil war. And what he did was honestly a work of political genius. He managed to grab all the power for himself while convincing everyone he was doing the complete opposite.
And you can see this duality right here. On the one hand, you've got the official propaganda, literally minted on a coin, saying he restored to the people their laws and their rights. But then you've got the historian Tacitus, who gives us a much more cynical take. He said, Augustus seduced the army with gifts and the people with corn. That word, seduced, is perfect. He didn't just take power, he made everyone want to hand it over to him. That was his secret sauce.
So what were his tools? Well, a big one was something called proconsular imperium. It sounds complicated, but really, it just means he had supreme military command. The Senate gave it to him, but what it actually did was put him in charge of pretty much the entire Roman army. You know, as the historian Cassius Dio said, the Senate was basically pleading for the monarchy at that point. They were so desperate for stability, they were willing to give him the keys to the kingdom.
And this is how he did it on a practical level. He didn't just command the army, he made them loyal by giving them land and money. He kept the Roman citizens happy and fed with cash handouts and cheap grain. He rebuilt the city, turning it into a city of marble, as Suetonius tells us. Basically, he concentrated power by making himself absolutely essential to everyone. The soldiers, the people, you name it.
But here's the thing. That whole system was custom-built for Augustus. His personality, his reputation. So what happens when his successors, Tiberius and Gaius, get the power but don't have his political touch? Well, that's when you start to see the cracks appear.
Tiberius tried to follow the script at first. He was super respectful to the Senate, acted like he didn't even want all that power, but in the background, this need to protect his position, to make sure no one could challenge him, it just festered, and that led to some really dark places.
Yeah, for Tiberius, holding on to power wasn't about building aqueducts, it was about systematically getting rid of anyone who could even remotely be seen as a threat. We're talking Augustus' own grandson, his wildly popular nephew Germanicus, and even his own right-hand man Sejanus. Power was now being maintained by making the circle of trust smaller and smaller, often through violence.
And that leads us straight to Gaius, or as we all know him, Caligula. Just look at this timeline. It's an absolutely terrifying nosedive. He starts out as this beloved figure, a dream come true for the people. But it escalates so fast. He kills his co-heir, openly mocks and abuses the Senate, and is eventually killed by his own bodyguards. The whole pretense of a partnership with the Senate is just gone.
The philosopher Seneca just summed up the sheer terror of Caligula's reign perfectly. He called him a mad beast who wished the Roman people had a single neck. Just pause and think about that image for a second. The desire for total control had twisted into a desire for total, easy annihilation. The mask of first citizen wasn't just slipping anymore. It had been ripped off, revealing the face of an absolute tyrant.
So after Caligula is assassinated, the rules of the game change yet again. The focus isn't just on eliminating rivals anymore. It's about straight-up buying loyalty. Concentrating power becomes a simple, cold, hard transaction.
Okay, look at this number, 15,000. 15,000 sesterces. What do you think that represents? Because I'll tell you, it represents a massive shift in how you become an emperor in Rome. And there's your answer. After Caligula's murder, the Praetorian Guard literally found his uncle Claudius hiding behind a curtain. And they didn't make him emperor because of his political skill or his family name. Nope, they made him emperor because he promised each of them this giant pile of cash. The historian Suetonius nails it, calling Claudius the first Caesar to purchase the loyalty of the troops. The throne was now officially for sale to the highest bidder.
And finally, we get to Nero.
He was like a greatest hits album of all the worst imperial tendencies. You can see it right here. He gets rid of family rivals, just like Tiberius. He threatens the entire Senate, just like Gaius. And, like his predecessor Claudius, he uses bribes to keep the guard on his side. It's the logical endpoint of this slide into tyranny, and it ends with the Senate declaring him a public enemy before he's forced to take his own life.
So we've walked through this wild first century of emperors. What's the takeaway? What did it really cost to put that much power in the hands of one man? Let's break down the patterns we've seen.
This table really spells it out, doesn't it? You can see the decay clear as day. Augustus starts with a public show of respect for the Senate. By the time you get to Gaius and Nero, it's open hostility. And check out the column on army support. It goes from land and gifts under Augustus to a straight-up cash purchase for Claudius and bribes for Nero. The methods for holding power just got more blatant, more transactional, and a lot more violent.
At the end of the day, it seems like the restored Republic of Augustus was really just a beautiful, fragile illusion. Over 100 years, the raw need to hold on to absolute power just chipped away at that facade, until all that was left was a system held up by bribery, fear, and murder. The power was completely concentrated, and it came at the expense of literally everyone else.
And that kind of leaves us with one last big question. The story of Rome's first century as an empire is a pretty chilling one. But is it just about Rome? Or does it point to something more universal? Is this slide from clever political maneuvering to outright tyranny just what happens, sooner or later, whenever one person gets to hold all the cards? Definitely something to think about.